Welcome to Arlington, Massachusetts, a town where learning and community thrive. At the heart of this spirit is Vittoria Dallin, a pioneering woman whose vision has shaped Arlington as a learning town for over a century. Her passion for education, the arts, and civic life continues to inspire. Today, we celebrate Vittoria's legacy and the vital role women play in our culture. Our guests, Heather Leavell, Executive Director and Curator of the Cyrus Dallin Art Museum, and Geri Tremblay, Museum President, continue Vittoria's work, keeping lifelong learning and community engagement central to Arlington. Join us as we honor Arlington's women, explore our shared history, and see how learning shapes our community. So, hi Heather.
Hi, hi James.
I want to start off by asking you about the book that you have in your lap right there, which you have just recently published, as I understand it. It's Cyrus Dallin Art Museum and Highlights and Insights. And in there, I know you do a great job of presenting Cyrus Dallin's advocacy and his art, etc. How about his wife, Vittoria Colonna Dallin? How about her profile in the book? Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, the book features a bas-relief portrait by Dallin of Vittoria tenderly holding their firstborn baby son, Bertram. And I think it's a perfect example of the way in which Vittoria's commitment to education as a means to fostering a more beautiful, kind, and just world. This book features a bas-relief portrait by Dallin of Vittoria tenderly holding her firstborn baby son, Bertram. And you can see this is the portrait I'm talking about. I think this sculpture perfectly illustrates Vittoria's commitment to education as a means to fostering a more beautiful, kind, and just world. In the book, I tell the story about how in 1937, 14-year-old George Pettingill visited the Dallin home with the editor of the Boston Traveler newspaper. Vittoria, who George described as a, quote, a lovely white-haired lady with a magnetic smile, greeted him warmly. He was meant to interview Cyrus that day, but Vittoria explained that her husband was just finishing up a lecture and he'd be home soon. So in the meantime, she led him on a tour of the art collection throughout the house. George was spellbound by the beautiful art, and one work in particular caught his attention, this relief that I mentioned. And he said, quote, out in the hall was a life-size plaque made years ago by Mr. Dallin of his baby son holding up a tiny hand to be kissed by his mother. Under it is the following inscription written by Mrs. Dallin. Dear little hand, the world hath need of thee. Still there are wrongs to right and slaves to free. And George goes on to say, I very much was impressed by the reality of the figures. And until we found this article about George's visit to the Dallin home, we had no idea who wrote that little poem. In hindsight, it makes perfect sense. Vittoria was an amazing poet, and her touching message to her newborn son reflects the values that she and Cyrus modeled for their children, but also the values that they modeled within their community.
That is wonderful. We are celebrating, we're talking to you really as part of a celebration of women and influential women, impactful women throughout Arlington's history. So wondering if you can frame what you do here at the Dallin Museum in terms of being another excellent example in Arlington of a lifelong learning, an approach to your part of this community in terms of promoting lifelong learning. And if you can just speak to the programs and the different ways in which the Dallin Museum kind of supports that.
Well, I think my passions and my values and the values of all of us at the museum very much align with Cyrus and Vittoria's values. Cyrus and Vittoria valued art. They valued education. They were both educators. They valued justice. They valued the equal treatment for all humans. So at the museum, we're committed to living their values by providing uplifting and educational experiences that foster a more truthful and inclusive understanding of our shared history. So for example, we honor Dallin's legacy as an Indigenous rights advocate by modeling what allyship can look like for a small community museum. We redesigned our Indigenous Peoples Gallery in collaboration with tribal leaders in Massachusetts and in Utah. That gallery provides rich historical context for Dallin's Indigenous subjects. It centers past and present Indigenous perspectives, and it promotes continued learning and dialogue. We also supported the establishment of Indigenous Peoples Day in Arlington. We participated in discussions around the harms of Native mascots, and our programs with the Massachusetts people, the Ute people, the Pokanoket, and the Eastern Shoshone elevate the cultures and the histories and the resilience of Indigenous people. And we're continuing that work. We're currently redesigning our European American Figures gallery using that same model. So in this new gallery, we are going to be featuring an Indigenous beadwork reimagining of Dallin's Paul Revere statue by a Narragansett artist named Sage Carbone. We're also featuring some text contributions from different figures like Sean Osborne, who is a public historian and an expert in Black patriots, as well as from Anthony Samarco, who is a well-known Boston historian who also is a board member of the Mass Charitable Mechanics Association, which is an organization founded by Paul Revere and still exists today. So it's a very nice tie-in with our statue in the gallery. Another example is this June, we will be offering our first Pride-themed tour that was developed by our tour guide manager, Emma Bresnan, and we're going to be highlighting connections between Dallin's art and the stories of LGBTQ artists, writers, and intellectuals who were in Dallin's creative circle or who were influenced by his art later. So we're currently also exploring additional thematic tours that center different communities with connection to Dallin's art. So please stay tuned for more to come. And lastly, we are finishing up a 3-year project to catalog and digitize Cyrus Dallin's personal archive. And the project is funded by the Community Preservation Act. And it allows us to preserve and share the legacy of Cyrus Dallin and his family in Arlington. So we've got thousands of documents, including photos, correspondence, news clippings, contracts, you name it. And they're all being made available online at dallin.org in our online searchable online database. And that material is going to be accessible and free for anyone to use.
That is wonderful, and I know that ACMi actually has been also taking part in, dramatizing and kind of presenting that material in a more kind of personal and visceral form. And we continue to, be excited about different ways in which we can support that particular project of yours.
Yes, thank you, and we're tremendously grateful for all of the good work ACMi has been doing with us.
Thank you very much. I did want to follow up a little bit on something that you were just saying, which was you were talking about the different work that you've done with various Indigenous tribes over these years. And I know that you, as the director of the museum for 23 years now, have forged a certain number of those bonds and connections or reinforced them. Could you talk about that a little bit more, just to, how it is that you are working together alongside Indigenous tribes?
Yeah, well, we view Cyrus Dallin's art as Cyrus Dallin's sculptures of Indigenous people as an opportunity to center contemporary Indigenous people, because there is a lot of debate about Dallin's work in this area. Some feel that those statues are stereotypical or ahistorical and promote unrealistic and inaccurate ideas of what Native people are like today. And we honor and respect that viewpoint. But we view Dallin's work as an opportunity to educate our audiences on contemporary Indigenous peoples and their experiences. And that's the beauty of Cyrus Dallin's art and his legacy as an Indigenous rights advocate. So we're really just continuing the work that he did in the 1920s and the 1930s. So we've had programs with the Massachusetts tribe on their culture, their history. We had an elder of the tribe, Elizabeth Solomon, write a land acknowledgement statement for our entry hall. So our visitors who come in will read what she has to say about where we are, that we're on Massachusetts land, and that wherever you go in the United States or North America, which is called Turtle Island by Native peoples, you are on Indigenous land. And just think about that, just being aware of that. And that leads to opening your mind up to learning new things about these communities. So that was one. Another example, we have a statue of Chief Washakie in our gallery. And Washakie was the leader of the Eastern Shoshone for 60 years. He was a military figure, he was a peacemaker, he was a diplomat, he was multilingual. He negotiated millions of acres of land for his people in the Wind River Reservation. And we were unveiling that statue and thought, well, how can we incorporate the contemporary Indigenous perspective? We're not just going to talk about Cyrus Dallin's statue of Washakie. How can we center contemporary perspective? So I contacted the tribe, and they agreed to have one of their tribal members, who is a descendant of Washakie, to film a short video for us for the gallery. So now our visitors can actually see one of Washakie's descendants speak about and hear him speak about his great-great-grandfather in the gallery.
Those are wonderful examples. Really appreciate that, especially because what you have here is a museum, and a museum that is a testament to a single man who lived at a given time and to the work that he produced. And that work is of a moment, right? It's a snapshot in time, and then things progress from there. The efforts you've made and the success you've had in connecting that time and those values, and how kind of influential and also forward-looking both Cyrus and Vittoria were as individuals and as a couple,
right.
Kind of connecting that in the ways that you were just describing to the contemporary kind of not just perspective but actual real life of current Indigenous tribes. That's a great service to our community, so well done. Speaking of Cyrus and Vittoria as a couple, I just want to finish by asking you, like, what stands out about how they approached kind of creating and reinforcing community bonds through art? How did they do that together?
They were very much a power couple, and Geri will speak about this more, but there's one artwork in this gallery that I think sums up their relationship perfectly, and it is right over here. It's Dallin's portrait relief of John Townsend Trowbridge. He was an Arlington resident, and he was an accomplished author and a poet, and he was an abolitionist, but he's most remembered for his young adult fiction. One story in particular, called The Tide Mill Stories, was set on Mystic Lakes. But he also did a post-Civil War survey entitled The South, a tour of its battlefields and ruined cities, and that was one of the earliest and most comprehensive accounts of the war's immediate aftermath. So Cyrus's portrait of John was for the author's 79th birthday. They were very good friends. Vittoria wrote a special birthday poem to accompany the sculpture, and both the portrait and the poem were unveiled at Trowbridge's birthday celebration, which was attended by artists and intellectuals in the Dallin Circle. So I'm gonna read you Vittoria's poem because it's very sweet. Okay. As thus you sit with fleeting smile and calmly read, your face alit with some sweet thought or flash of wit, oh, let us listen for a while. Read some bright tale, too many dear, in your delightful manner told. Read to us from your book of gold, and your home idol let us hear. Do not forget to read to us too, things written in a merry mood, and for a little interlude, a clever parody will do. And my own story, read again. It is a charming legacy with many a precious memory of stirring times and famous men. Read on, dear friend, your tales and lays, and may you find as seasons go, the listening circle wider grow, and life's best blessings crown your days. And for me, art really is at the heart of everything that Cyrus and Vittoria did on behalf of their community.
All right, we appreciate that. And one last question for you, Heather, which is, we've been talking a lot and hearing a lot, and it's been great about the museum, the work that you do here, the importance of Vittoria's, as a support for Cyrus, but also as a partner, and all of that. What I would like to end with is something much more personal, which is you have chosen this as the place for you to spend the last, quarter century of your working life.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you? What drew you to it, and what keeps you at it?
Yes, well, I have a great story for you. So I majored in art history as an undergraduate at Boston College, and I got my master's in art history and museum studies at Tufts. We moved here when I was in high school. I was going into freshman year of high school. I was over the summer, and my parents growing up, would always take us to museums, always, wherever we went. And one of the first things we did when we moved to this area was go to the Museum of Fine Arts. And the first thing I saw at the Museum of Fine Arts was this beautiful statue of a Lakota warrior on horseback. And it just struck me. I loved it so much. And I didn't even know at that point that I wanted to study art history. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then fast forward, the year 2000, I get married and we have an apartment in Arlington. I'm in the middle of my graduate studies in art history. We're walking around Arlington Center. It was in the evening. We had probably just had dinner at Punjab. And someone left the lights on in the Indigenous Peoples Gallery at night. And I look through the window and I saw the Appeal to the Great Spirit sitting there and through the window. And I thought, what is that doing here? I had no idea who Cyrus Dallin was. I just knew that I loved that statue, and I needed to learn more about why it was here in Arlington and what it was all about. And that just started me on a very long journey. I called Geri. I left a message at the museum to volunteer my time, and Geri called me right back. And now it's been 20-something years later, and I just find that there's so much relevance to the work today. I love art because of what it teaches us about who we are today. And they're just learning, the more I learn about Cyrus and Vittoria Dallin, the more I want to learn. So what I learn then creates more questions. So I'm always trying to get my questions answered. So you could call me a lifelong learner too in that respect. It's just this drive that I have to want to learn everything about what these people did, because there's so much relevance and goodness that we can take from their example.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I love the touchstones of, first as a high school student, then as, a graduate, years later as a graduate student studying art history, and boom, you're drawn back into it. And now, 26 years beyond that, you're still at it. So we wish you, lots of vigor going forward as well.
Thank you.
And there's still much to be done here at the museum, I know, and we will be tracking and monitoring things as you guys continue to progress.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. As we transition from Heather to Geri, we're reminded that Arlington's story is built on collaboration and vision. Heather's insights highlight how the museum keeps our history alive. And now, let's turn to Geri Tremblay, whose leadership ensures that the spirit of lifelong learning and community connection remains strong for future generations. Here's our conversation with Geri. Geri.
Yes.
Welcome, number one.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you for coming here.
Glad that we could join you and that you are able to provide time for us to get the kind of insight that we are getting in this visit. So how does the museum preserve Vittoria Colonna Dallin's legacy and, of civic leadership in this case? Yeah.
So we do this through exhibits, art events, highlighting archival works, articles in the newspaper, newsletters. We have publications and programs like this on our website, ACMi, Facebook, and as you saw in Heather's discussion, she published a book, Cyrus Dallin Art Museum, Highlights and Insights, which is a great success. So it's very thorough, and she explains the highlights, obviously, within the museum. And I think Vittoria Colonna would be happy with that, because we are a community museum, as well as, we hope, an international museum. And although Cyrus Dallin was an international award-winning sculptor in the family, Vittoria Colonna was the power behind the throne. He was a quiet man and shy and not very self-promoting, so that she supported him a lot. Not only does the museum have newly acquired art which has historic insight into those works. For example, we exhibit some of Dallin's paintings. We've got about 13 of them, and they're little known, so that's different, you know? But our Art on the Green, held on Town Day, encourages local artists to promote their works with the Cutter Gallery, which is in the lower level here. Offers painters and photographers and other artists to exhibit their work on the walls of the gallery. And we think that Vittoria Colonna would really be pleased that we're advancing local artists and painters. And one of the events that we have, Chuck Luker, one of our trustees, presents Art on the Green, and it gives children and adults some time and space to create, and it's supported by him, a real life artist who offers suggestions and encouragements. And the encouragements are different types of products: a sketch, a painting, a watercolor, or a crayoned piece of art. So additionally, during April vacation, the museum also offers the kids a sculpture workshop, again, down in our basement, and it's staffed by the directors, trustees, and volunteers. So we have a lot of activities for adults and kids. Much of what we do exemplifies and supports hands-on learning and lifelong learning, as Vittoria Colonna Dallin did with her involvement in our community and her community, Arlington.
Great. And you just mentioned lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. I also posed this question to your colleague your colleague Heather, excuse me. But I want to ask you, this is part of a series in which we are looking at different aspects of Arlington as a learning town, a center of lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. And we tend to put the Dallin Museum, among other local institutions, right at the heart of that. Can you explain to our audience, like, in what ways you are contributing to that part of our community?
The Dallin Museum supports lifelong learning through many of our varied events, lectures, presentations within and outside of Arlington. We offer guided tours at the museum. I do, and two other directors do, the Arlington Center walking tour in the summertime. We have 3 or 4 of them. And we do broadcast videos and publications. And then, speaking of publications, Heather showed you her book, Highlights and Insights. Great work, frankly. A work of art in itself. And there's another book, Cyrus Dallin and his Native American Works, which is an elementary school level activity book of our Native American collection of bronzes and plasters and paintings. And within that, are activities like word searches, word scrambles, coloring activities, sketching activities. There's instructions how to make a cradle board for a papoose, or painting a teepee. So it's 3rd grade level. The Arlington schools have come for a tour and then have left with a copy of the activity book. We also have James McGough lectures that have been printed in a book called Cyrus Dallin, The Life of Arlington's Honorary Native Son. And it features his biography. There's a chapter on Massasoit, the Civil War, and the 57-year journey to install the symbol of Boston, our Paul Revere, which we also have a copy of that out on the lawn. And another book, Walking Tours of Cyrus Dallin Sculptures, is a tour of Arlington Center. Another tour, second tour, is Arlington Heights, and then the 3rd tour is an extended walk of Arlington Heights, and it's self-guided. Additionally, we have Arlington's cultural heights that dating from 1900 to 1925. This highlights our local talent, that is people at that time who were craftsmen, musicians, artists, architects who lived in the town. All of these are available at our gift shop. We also have an oral history series which consists of videotapes of remembrances of family, friends, even grandchildren of the Dallins, who of course knew and loved them. And James McGough, our founder, wanted to preserve the memory and the history of Arlington in this internationally acclaimed sculpture. The museum is also creating videos of 13 of Dallin's landscape sculptures within an hour's travel of Boston, and you can visit them on our website, Facebook, or in person. 3 are in Arlington. One is the Robbins Memorial Flagstaff, which is to the right of Town Hall. The Menominee Hunter is in the town garden to the left of the town hall. And on Winter Street is the teacher Mary Scanlon at the school that's on Winter Street. And although you have to take the ferry, it's still within an hour of Boston. My favorite is Dallin's landscape, sculpture of the monumental signing of the Mayflower Compact. You can see Governor Bradford, Miles Standish, and Elder Brewster within the group of 16 figures, 11 men, 3 women, 2 children, a boy and a girl. The bronze bas relief is 9 by 16 feet, so it's huge and I think magnificent. And the signing of the Mayflower Compact was a historic event in 1620 when the Pilgrims arrived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And of course, you know that our state, Massachusetts, was named for a local tribe. And the relief is a moment in American history, and the bas relief may be one of the finest examples of Cyrus Dallin's art. And then other figures in bronze that are within this series of local sculptures is Anne Hutchinson in Boston, Massasoit and Plymouth, Judge Cushing, Situate, the Paul Revere, the Appeal to the Great Spirit, the Angel Moroni in Belmont. And last but not least, a little local story. Scout Alex Rego of Troop 306 and an Eagle Scout candidate, along with volunteer Kevin Blanton, designed and constructed a little free library in the shape of the Jefferson Cutter House. And the library offers books about Native people and by Native people. And to quote Cyrus Dallin, the sculptures and monuments that adorn our cities and towns should have a twofold purpose. Not only should they be memories to brave men and brave deeds, but they should ornament and beautify our public squares, stimulating hereby the imagination and love of beauty in all the beholders.
All right, wonderful. I want to move to another topic now, and that is, Vittoria's full name is Vittoria Colonna Dallin.
Yes.
And that is reminiscent of Michelangelo Buonarroti's Renaissance muse. So there is a connection here, I think. Tell us how Michelangelo became such a big influence in Vittoria's life. And does that artistic heritage appear in her work or in the museum story?
Yeah, I think being named Vittoria Colonna was intentional by her mother. And of course we know she was Michelangelo's niece, and I think that's muse. And I think that's the whole point. She was well aware of this association, and she delved into Renaissance artists because of this identification. She attended girls' Latin school. She learned to sketch and draw. Why? Michelangelo and his muse. She taught at Mass College of Art. She was drawn to Cyrus Dallin as a sculptor when they met. She married him, she encouraged him and supported him. And while they lived in Paris, she said she visited all the museums to learn about the art. And she also authored, and this is little known, a sketchbook of great painters, which includes Giotto, Fra Angelico, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo himself, Correggio, a total of 21 painters. And she traveled to Italy with Cyrus to see, obviously, the art. And they went to historic sites, and we have a photograph, 1925, I believe, where she and Cyrus are standing on either side of the Leopoldi flagstaff in front of St. Mark's. There are 3 flagstaffs there, so it's very identifiably St. Mark's Cathedral. And in her lecture, Experiences of a Sculptor's Wife, 1935, we learn that she threw herself into the art and the life of an artist while they lived in Paris while he studied. She studied French, she spent time at the Tuileries Gardens, she lived in the neighborhood. She supported Cyrus in all his endeavors. They even remortgaged their house, and I believe it was to pay the expenses on the Paul Revere, but it was certainly for one of his works of art. So Vittoria Colonna Murray was his muse, and she believed in Dallin when he wrote, "Art to the many is considered a luxury and an accomplishment, whereas in truth it is one of the most necessary functions of a well-ordered life, and to deprive man of this means of expression would plunge him into a barbarism from which there would be little hope of ever rescuing him."
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to fast forward now to the 21st century, well, to the 20th and 21st centuries, the end of the 20th and now here in the 21st century, and ask you, first of all, same story as I asked Heather, what brought you to the Dallin Museum? Was there a Dallin Museum for you to be brought to? Tell us about your own kind of origin story with the museum.
There was no Dallin Museum. There was a Dallin Committee. And my brother, who was a selectman at the time, Stephen Gilligan, called and he said, "You gotta call this guy, James McGough, the town barber." What am I calling a town barber for? So he says, "No, he needs a cataloger." Well, I worked at the MFA, and I also have been on archaeological expeditions, and so I know how to catalog, but James and the rest of the committee did not. So I called Jim. I thought this was a temporary position with no pay. It's become a 30-year position with no pay, with Jim McGough, the founder, and the Dallin Committee, first of all, getting permission from the Board of Selectmen, and there was an article in the 1995 town meeting for us to be established as a museum. And then a year or 2 later, they actually gave us rooms in this building, the Jefferson Cutter House, and that's how we started.
And what, this is, as I said, we're looking at this series in a couple of ways. One is we want to highlight the idea of lifelong learning. We've talked about that. The other is, as I mentioned at the outset, we are really looking at the history of Arlington through a particular lens in this series. And that lens is the influence of women over time. Different figures, either as you were saying, as the power behind the throne of a more well-known male partner, or in their own right. We see, you may not, but we see you and Heather and the work that you do here as part of that line. And so just would love to ask you to speak a little bit about what it is that you see as your role and for via the museum in terms of keeping this community of ours as vibrant as possible.
That's a big question. But I think one thing is I intended to help by doing the cataloging initially, and I was drawn into the museum. I grew up in Arlington. I lived in Arlington for like 60 years. And I was not aware of Cyrus Dallin. I wasn't aware that he was the sculptor for the Robbins Memorial Library or the Menominee Hunter, and trained as a classicist. But so it's American art is not my thing. But I just felt his story was so compelling, and Jim was a force in and of himself, and he was determined to have the town works, and there were about 20 to 25 of them when he had the concept of a museum. So he wanted to preserve the town works and the story about Cyrus Dallin, because he's the most unknown sculptor, I think, in America, and he has done such fine work. And once I got involved, I couldn't give it up.
All right, so be it. Okay, well said. Anything that you would like to add?
Well, I'd love people to come to the museum. We're open on the weekends. We watch the newspapers and the constant contacts, because we send out invitations if we're having a particular event. We will have an art in the park in July, I believe, and Town Day. We have a front lawn full of artists. We usually have 20 to 25 artists who are selling their own wares. And this, I think that's part of the lifelong learning. It gives the artists an opportunity to show their wares and sell them, etc. We have painters, jewelers, quilters, a lot, all handmade art. And what else? We may have something in September. So we do a lot of outreach, and we love to have people visit. You can book a tour. You can come to our gift shop on the weekend, and we'd love to see everybody.
Great. Well, the Cyrus Dallin Art Museum lies right, literally, at the heart of Arlington Center.
Yes, it does.
And there is privilege and some responsibility in that, and you guys handle both of those very well.
Thank you. It's the team. I have to say that. Both the board of directors and the board of trustees are very positive and hardworking, and everybody has a different take and a different idea, and I think that's a good part of our success, frankly.
Great. Well, we thank you for what you do, and we wish you continued energy and vigor to proceed doing it.
Thank you, James.
Going forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us as we celebrate Vittoria Dallin and all the women who continue to shape Arlington into a true learning town. Their passion and vision open doors to lifelong learning for everyone. Stay with us for more inspiring stories as we spotlight women making a lasting impact and building a community where everyone can grow, connect, and learn together.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.